So what we're going to do now is we're going to walk through a case study that will give us a chance to compare and contrast several different approaches to solving the same problem. So we'll look at how to use parallel streams, completable futures, and RxJava. And the particular example we're going to look at is something called the ImageStreamGang case study, which I'll talk about in a second, which is actually not unlike the programming assignments you've been doing, just a little bit different in some ways. So this particular app combines a whole bunch of different techniques. It combines Java sequential and parallel streams, Java completable futures, different variants of Java reactive streams within a little framework I call the StreamGang framework to download, transform, store, and display images. And we'll see how parallel streams must use the fork join framework. Completable futures can optionally use the fork join framework. In fact, we'll show two different implementations, that one of which uses completable futures fork join framework, one of which uses some other thread pool instead of the common fork join framework. And basically what happens here is you give it a list of URLs. It takes those URLs, it downloads them, and applies image filters to the URLs. You can have different kinds of filters here. You can have grayscale filter, null filter, other kinds of filters. And then the results of all this are stored in persistent storage on the local device. Again, very much like what you're doing for your assignment, just slightly different mechanisms and different GUI. This particular example applies a whole bunch of different modern Java features, including parallel and sequential streams. This is the first thing we're going to look at, arguably the most concise way of doing things. So we take the list of URLs, and in parallel, we get rid of URLs that have already been downloaded and cached. We ignore them. We download images that have not been cached. We apply our good friend map multi to apply the filters in parallel, working with the parallel streams features, and then we apply toList, and that comes back as a list of images. We'll talk about that one first. We're also going to talk about a completable futures variant of this, which is really quite interesting, more complicated, but very cool. And if you look at the performance results, this one's the one that typically wins, and we'll see why that is when we look at the details of the code. This is obviously more complicated than that, but there's a benefit because you get a performance boost, hopefully. And then the third and final thing we're going to look at is one that uses RxJava, and this is actually quite similar to what you've been doing for the latest programming assignment with a few tweaks. And this is going to take the list of URLs and then use a parallel flowable in order to ignore ones that have already been downloaded, download the ones that have not been downloaded already, apply filters, and then we collect the results into a list. So those are the different mechanisms we're doing. We'll talk about completable futures and reactive streams after we go through the first example, which is the parallel streams. We won't really look at this in any detail, but if you explore other parts of this program, you see there's other things that use other modern Java features like lambda expressions and method references, so we can write nice, convenient, clean code like this with method references and lambda expressions instead of writing ugly Java, old school Java code that uses things like anonymous inner classes, which way too much syntactic ceremony for my taste, at least, most people's taste. So this app has lots of different pieces. It's got a whole slew of different implementations, which are all part of this ImageStreamGang framework. There's a whole filter hierarchy that we use to do the various kinds of image filtering and so on. And we're going to look here at the sequential and parallel streams implementations first, and then we're going to take a look at the completable futures implementations, and then finally we're going to look at the ones that have to do with RxJava. We're not going to talk about the reactive Project Reactor implementations. That's a topic for another course, but they're not too dissimilar to the ones we see here with RxJava. Once you know RxJava, it's usually very straightforward to learn how to use the various Project Reactor techniques. So that's the overview of the case study. Now we're going to start walking through the example code.